Om Shanti. Let's meditate for some time, then we'll begin. Sit still and quiet. Keep your body absolutely still. Just go within. Come to the awareness of the being that you are. I am a soul. My present context is this body and the present state of affairs around me. But I am neither my body nor my context. I am pure energy. A pure being that thinks and experiences. I'm just a small star sitting behind the eyes of this body. This world is a stage where I play my role, but I do not belong here and nothing belongs to me here. It's just a temporary play that I'm part of. As I sit in this awareness, I'm reminded of the one I belong to. That supreme energy, the supreme soul, Paramatma. This remembrance takes me to the awareness of the Supreme Soul. My parent, the one I share all relationships with, is an ocean of love. As I get connected with him, I can feel his love and presence. Baba's love is unconditional. He always loves me as I am. Doesn't give up on me when I give up on myself. He's absolutely relentless and unconditional in his love for me. His love is very healing and transformative. I feel his love reaching out to me in the form of beautiful rays of light. I bathe under that shower of love. All my doubts and fears get washed away under that shower of love. Let me relish this moment of loveful communion with the ocean of love. Sit in this feeling for some time. Om Shanti. So, yesterday I was talking about not thinking of yourself as less than or greater than who you are. And I received some questions which said that they were not clear, very clear about the less than part. So I would talk a little about that. So it is not some rocket science that I'm talking about. You have heard of the word inferiority complex. Okay, so there are two complexes that people suffer from: the inferiority kind and the superiority kind, which is very, very prevalent and known to all of us. Is my voice low? No, it is fine, right? So, okay. So all of you turn up your volume if it is low, okay? It's got nothing to do from this end. You have to turn it up from that end. So when we talk about inferiority complex and superiority complex in the world, then what is it about? So when somebody says that this person has inferiority complex, then what it means is they always think that I'm not good enough. Okay, so I'm not like this one, or I'm not like that one, or I'm not good enough. And then when we talk about superiority complex, it is the opposite. Nobody is like me, and I'm the best, and everybody is less than me. Okay, so, and the thing is, you can only be in either of these complexes when you identify with the external. That is, you can't say that I am more loveful than this one, because if you are loveful, then you will be accepting. So love doesn't mean that you will say I'm more loveful than this one. Then you are not loveful. You are doing the opposite of what loveful means. Okay, or I'm more peaceful than this one. So then you are getting disturbed by their peacelessness, so you're not peaceful in the first place. So when you say I'm not good enough, it is in comparison to something external that the other person has. Maybe beauty or talent or speech or the capacity to earn or something, some designation, some position, some qualification. So that is why when you do not associate with external identities, you free yourself from this less than and greater than loop. Okay, is this clear now? Right? So you come out of that whole game when you stop identifying with the external. When you think of yourself as a peaceful, loveful, pure being, then automatically you have to think about the other person like that, because you can't say I'm pure if you have impure thoughts about the other one. And I am pure means you have pure thoughts about yourself also, that I am also good enough. So I am good enough and nobody is less than or greater than me. So we are all unique and everybody has a definite place in this whole scheme of things. All right. So I think, and even if there are other questions, again, we'll take this up. But for now, this is what I want to share. Then, today we will talk about God a little more, and I want to talk about the form of God today. So we talked about God being a someone and not a something, and God being somewhere, not everywhere. Although I did not talk about where that somewhere is, I will take it up in a future session. So today we will talk about what God looks like. So for that, I will give you a very small hint or a key which will make other questions very easy to answer. So when we say God, then God is called Param Atma. Okay, so Param Atma. So Param Atma means Supreme Soul. Okay, so you see, we use these words. Primarily, I will talk about 5 words: Devatma, Dharamatma, Dharmatma, okay, Mahatma, okay, then Sadharanatma, just Atma you call them, and then you say Paramatma. Now, you never use a plural for Paramatma. So nobody says Paramatmai. So you never say supreme souls. No, supreme soul is singular. And then there are deity souls. Okay, deity souls are called Devatmai. Then there are Dharmatmai, which are called prophet souls. So those which establish religion. So Jesus, Buddha, Abraham, Muhammad, these were Dharamatmai, prophet souls. Then you talk about Mahatmai or great souls, which in which category fall Mahatma Gandhi and Raja Ram Mohan Roy or Dayanand Saraswati ji or some other people of those kind, Vivekanand. So we say they are Mahatmas. So they are great souls. Then we talk about ourselves today as ordinary souls, but we will have to think about whether we are ordinary in our original state or in our present state. But anyways, most people look ordinary right now. So ordinary souls there are. And then there is the supreme soul, which is one of his kind. He is only one. So basically, you don't have a pronoun for a soul, because a soul is genderless. A soul doesn't have a gender. A soul is not male or female. So you don't have a pronoun for a soul. So, and because it is a living entity, you can't use an it for it. Okay, so a soul is neither a he nor a she nor an it. So now our language is all very body conscious. So we don't know how to address a soul. So we use a he for a supreme soul, but a supreme soul is not a he in the sense of a gender specific he. Is just a soul, right? So, but we use a he for a lack of pronoun. You can use a she also, it doesn't matter. But primarily we use a he. So when we say he is a supreme soul, it's not that a supreme soul is a he or a she, but for lack of a pronoun, we do that. All right, because there are some people who are very touchy about these gender subjects, so then people get very offended if God is a he and not a she. So you could see God as a he or a she, it doesn't matter, because neither are you a he or a she, nor is God a he or a she, nor an it. So we just use he for communication purposes. So when we say God is a supreme soul, so he doesn't have he is only one of his kind, not many. So that is why supreme souls doesn't exist, supreme soul. Now when we say supreme soul, so God is anyways a soul, and then he is a supreme kind of a soul. So what is supreme about the supreme soul, we will understand that later. But God is a soul anyway. So now that we have finished, or rather not finished, but at least started talking about the soul, so you have some idea about how the soul looks like and what is the form of the soul. So just like we discussed that a soul is a point of light, and that light is conscient energy, Chetan energy, and the soul has the capacity to think, create thoughts and feelings, take decisions, and have sanskars, right? So a soul has a man, buddhi, and sanskar. So similarly, God is also a soul. So God is also conscient energy, Chetan Satta, and his form is also a point of light. So God is not God doesn't have a physical form. Basically, we also do not have a physical form, but we identify with this body. God doesn't identify with any body. God is independent of the body. So he is a point of light, and God also has a man, buddhi, and sanskar. All right, just like you and I, but his sanskar is he is benevolent, kalyankari. God is always benevolent. So just like whenever we meet somebody, the first thought we get is, what can this person give me? So when God sees anybody, the first thought he has is, what can I do for this soul? Okay, so God is Kalyankari. So God is benevolent or Kalyankari, and he always has this thought of how to uplift this one, or what can I do for this one. God never thinks of what can I get from this one, because he's full. So he doesn't think of getting, he thinks of giving. All right. Now, even if we think of giving, we will only think of giving for some time, and then we'll think about getting. So if nowadays, we have become so stingy that once I will make a call to somebody, and then I call that person once, twice, thrice, and then fourth time I'll say, now that person should call me. I made 4 calls, so they should also respond. So now we can't even give a call to somebody 4 times without them returning a call. So then God is not like that. God is Kalyankari. So he can give relentlessly. So that is something about God. That is his sanskar. So that is why there are 2 words, devta and levta. So devta means dene wala and levta means lene wala. But God doesn't come into this cycle of devta and levta also. God is like forever the giver. So he doesn't become a giver sometime and then a taker sometime. He is always a giver. So that is the quality of God, the sanskar of God. Then when we talk about the buddhi of God, so the buddhi of God is truth. So in God's buddhi, there is truth. So like we talked about, in our buddhi, there is material consciousness, right? So we are always, all our ideas, our beliefs stem from material consciousness. But because God doesn't operate with the material, So that is why he doesn't have any material consciousness in him. So all his beliefs and thoughts and wisdom arises from pure spiritual consciousness. So that is why his buddhi has the truth. So have you heard this expression in bhakti called jhuti maya, jhuti kaya, jhuta sab sansar? So they say that, and in Vedanta, they say that everything is an illusion. So the world is an illusion, and they say you see this table, but this table is not there, and then this is an illusion. So then God says, no, it's not that something is not there, but it is not what it looks like. So you see somebody, you think that this is my father or my mother or my this is my child, but the thing is they are neither a child nor a father nor a mother, nor they are yours. So they are a soul. Okay, they are a soul, not my father, my mother. That is a soul, this is a soul. But then the way you see it is an illusion. So, because of this Brahm, this Jhoot, there is so much illusion in this world. So, God tells us that I know the truth. So, I see things for what they are, and you see things according to your conditioning. So, when you look at something, your conditioning colors it, but I can see the truth of it, the original design of it. And because I can see that, that is why God is called the truth, and this is what God's buddhi is about. All right. Then about the mind of God. So just like our mind is always all over the place, and then it is peaceless and restless and whatnot. So God is the ocean of love, ocean of peace, ocean of purity. So God's mind is always full of feelings of peace, purity, love, benevolence, and these kinds. Okay, so his mind operates very differently from our mind. Do you understand that when we connect with somebody, just like you are connecting with me, now this is a very good situation that we are in, because we are not connecting physically, because you are not here where I am, but you are logging into my ID, and then you are connecting with me. But when we connect, there is an exchange. Okay, so, and in this exchange, I open up my mind and my buddhi and my sanskar to you. Right. So you come in contact with, when you come in contact with anybody, it is the mind, the buddhi, and the sanskar that you come in contact with. So when you connect with somebody, you connect with their man, buddhi, and sanskar. And when you connect with a man, buddhi, sanskar, then their man, buddhi, sanskar starts influencing you. All right, their man, buddhi, sanskar starts influencing you, just like you have been influenced in some manner by this course which has started for some time. So now, just like you can log into this Zoom and listen to what I have in my man, buddhi, and sanskar, which is again based on what God has given. All right. So now, similarly, when you log into God, you have access to his man, buddhi, and sanskar. And when you have access to his man, buddhi, and sanskar, then they start coloring your man, buddhi, and sanskar. Okay, so that is why it is said company colors, and that is why there is this expression satsang. So satsang means the company of God, because Sat is only God. So if you look at this word Sat, so Sat means Avinashi and Aparivartanshil. That is that which is indestructible and immutable. So not amenable to change, and not destructible. So that is called Satya. So there is only one Satya in this universe, that which never changes, that is God. So even the soul loses its quality and changes. So there is only one that is called Sat, because that is immutable or unchangeable, and that is God, and indestructible as well. So when we say Sat Sang, it is the Sang of God, and you don't connect with God physically. You always have to tune into your non-physical form to connect with God. All right. So this is about connecting with God, and what God looks like, and what is his man, buddhi, and sanskar. So now that we have discussed this, what is the name of God? So the form of God is clear, so you can see God behind me. So, or rather, God is in front of me. I don't know where he is, behind me or in front of me, but in the picture you can see God behind me. So that's a point of light. So this is the picture of God. All right, and God is called Roop mein Bindu, Guno mein Sindhu. So he is point in form but ocean in qualities. So point in form but ocean in qualities. So that is why you can see a small point and the ocean beside the point, which indicates the qualities of God. So this is Roop mein Bindu and Guno mein Sindhu. So now that we know, that we have a good clear idea about who is God that I'm talking about, so I would like you to know the name of God. So the name of God is Shiv. But when I say Shiv, Shiv is not the picture that you see in the temple. So that is Shankar. Okay, so we make a distinction between Shiv and Shankar, because God says that because I didn't have a form, you gave me that form, but that is not my form. I look like this only. That is why you created Shivlings to worship me, right? So if I was Shankar, what was the need of Shivling? So you had if I had a physical form, why did you worship me in the incorporeal form? So God doesn't have a corporeal or a physical form, but because of want of the ability to connect with an incorporeal form, we created that. So when we say Shiv, Shiv means point of light. And why is God called Shiva? Because the literal meaning of Shiv is three things. Shiv literally, this word, this term Shiv means three things literally. First is dot, point. Second is seed. So Shiv means seed. And third is Shiv means benevolent one, Kalyankari. So because God is a dot, because God is the seed of humanity, and because God is the benevolent one, that is why he's called Shiv. And we call him Shiv Baba, because God is our parent and his name is Shiva. So when we say Shiv Baba, it is this point of light, Shiv Baba, that we are referring to. Got it? So can you say Shiv Baba? Because you also need to, so when the child takes birth, he has to call out his father's name. So can you just talk to your Baba and call him Shiv Baba for once? So everybody, so Shiv Baba. And then with love, you can say Mera Baba, Meetha Baba, Pyara Baba. So he's mine, he's sweet, and he's loving. Okay. So that is God's introduction. Now, this Shiv Baba, that is a point of light, that is Kalyankari and pure, full of love, purity, peace. This Shiv Baba resides in a world which is different from this world. We will talk about the address of God tomorrow, because that's a little big chapter. Now, if you look at all the religions, then every religion has always talked about God as a point of light. Okay, so if you look at Islam, Islam says Allah ek noor hai ya noor illahi, which means God is a point of light. Noor means light. Okay, so Islam says Allah noor hai ya noor illahi. If you look at Christianity, Jesus never said that I am God. Jesus said God is light and I am the Son of God. All right. Guru Nanak Dev Ji never said I am God. He said Ek Onkar Nirakar. So he's formless. Formless means a point of light, because if you look at a point doesn't exist geometrically. So a point is no undefined geometrically. So when you say formless, it actually means a point. So Guru Nanak Dev Ji said Ek Onkar Nirakar. Then if you look at Hinduism, then the first temple that Hindu religion, it was built under Hindu religion, was the temple of Somnath. And in the temple of Somnath, there was no physical figure of a deity or something. There was only this shivling which was made of diamonds. And the name of the shivling is Shiv Jyotir Lingam, which means Shiva, the symbol of light. Okay, so in order to show that Shiv is the symbol of light, they created a shivling made of diamonds so that it shines and tells you God looks like this. All right, so basically everything was pointing out in the same direction, but because we were body conscious, so we could not connect to that. So now, in the discussion yesterday, I gave you an idea of why we need to connect with God. So now, when we connect with God, we first come to the consciousness that I am a soul. And when I am a soul and I connect with the qualities and the form of the Supreme Soul, I start getting back to soul consciousness. Correct? And because all our problems are born out of body consciousness, so connecting with God makes me seated in soul consciousness, and this gives me the power to deal with the problems that are there in the world. But instead of doing this, what we did in bhakti is, instead of going to God and because this connection, we didn't know what the purpose of connection is, but we thought the purpose of everything is connection. So, and we couldn't connect to a point of light, so we gave God a body. Okay, so if I can't become like you, I can make you become like me so that we can connect. And then not just a body, we gave him everything that we did. Okay, so we made God have bhang and alcohol and everything that we consumed, and we wrote stories in which God did everything that we do. So I will tell you an incident. There was one brother who came to me and he said, Didi, I am a chain smoker and I don't know how to leave this habit. So I said, you should remind yourself that you are a pure soul and the child of the Supreme Soul, Shiva. So it doesn't suit you to smoke. So he said, Didi, please don't mind, but even Shiva smokes. So what do I do about that? So he said, Shankarji bhi to chilam pite hain. I said, no, that Shankarji is not Shiva. So it took me a long time to make him understand that when you're pure, you don't smoke. So because the purest of pure was made to do everything impure so that we didn't have to bother to become pure. So, um, I have this thing with validation. So when you do something wrong, you want validation, right? Because your conscience bites. That is why you need validation. And what better validation than God Himself validating your wrong acts? So, what human beings did is they made God validate all the wrong they were doing by creating stories in which God did the same thing. Okay, so this is the way human beings transcended their conscience, which was biting and hurting them and asking them to change. So when you can have godly sanction for everything wrong that you do, that's a very good way to overcome the biting conscience that is hurting you or making you uncomfortable. So this is precisely the conspiracy that the human race did against themselves, although they thought it is in its favor, but it was not. So this is how we developed this whole culture where we talked about God as doing all that we do and God as behaving. So we say, whenever somebody does something mischievous or vicious, we say, thank God you are also human. So okay, so I hear that compliment a lot. So sometimes, when I'll be talking in the class, people will be a little scared, but then when they meet me otherwise and they see something, for example, me getting angry or me getting upset or me getting lazy, then they'll say, thank God you are also human. We are so glad you are so. So it makes us very comfortable to see that everything has flaws because it justifies our flaws. And when we are confronted with the perfect one, the flawless one, it makes us very scared. So that is why we made an image of God that was not so perfect, so that it would make us happy and comfortable in our imperfections. Okay, so basically, this is the conspiracy we crafted against ourselves. So, this is God's form and name. And God in every religion is called out to be a point of light. So, this knowledge that you are receiving is not in contradiction with anything, it's just in contradiction with the human element that was introduced later. So just like, when Christianity started, it was very clear that God is a point of light, and God is light, and Christ is not God. But then what we did is we said, oh, I cannot connect with light because there is no light within me. So let me connect with Christ and raise Christ to the position of God. So it is later that all these aberrations crept into every religion. Basically, every religion talked about truth. Okay, so this is how we see it. Now, about God's qualities. So, in brief, we discussed that God is an ocean of love, ocean of peace, ocean of purity. So, today we will talk a little about God being the ocean of love. So, you must have heard phrases like God will be annoyed, or don't displease God, or God will punish you, or God will, or भगवान क्या सोचेंगे, है ना? So what will God think if he sees you like this? So these are some of the expressions we grow up with. So do you think God will judge you or hate you or punish you, or do you think he will do all that? What if you committed a murder? Will he punish you? Will he punish you or will he not punish you? So he won't punish you because he doesn't need to punish you. Now you see, there is one confusion we create between the law of karma and God. Okay, so just like you see, when you commit a crime, you are held accountable according to the law. No person holds you accountable. It is the law of the land that holds you accountable, right? So you are punishable under law, not by some person. No person, even the judge, only in accordance with the law has the right to punish you. He cannot punish you because he wants to punish you or if thinks you are punishable. No. It's not dependent on any person to pass a judgment about who you are or what you have done. It is the law that punishes you. Similarly, whatever we receive is in accordance with the law of karma. So there is this spiritual law, just like there are laws of physics and man-made laws pertaining to crime and the world. So similarly, there are laws of spirituality. But there is a difference between the laws of spirituality and the laws of physics and the laws of man-made laws. Okay, so what is the difference? So just like, in case of cyber crime, so until there is no law, you are not a criminal. So in case of man-made laws, you are not a criminal until the law is in place, right? And then it may differ from one place to another. So you may be a criminal in one country and you may not be a criminal in another country. But with the laws of spirituality, it is not like this. Whenever you do something, according to the law of spirituality, you are always punishable. Whether you are here or there or anywhere in the world, you are punishable because the law of spirituality is a truth which holds true for every time and every place. Whether you know it or don't know it, whether you have been educated about it or not educated about it, this law functions just like the laws of physics. Okay, so even if you don't know the laws, they are still there. Similarly, these laws of spirituality also operate. And one of the laws of spirituality, I have been talking about so many laws in different classes. And the biggest law of spirituality is the law of karma. So when we say law of karma, you have heard about the law of karma in many different forms. For example, what goes around comes around, what you sow, so shall you reap. Yeah, what you do is what you get. So this is the law of karma, and whatever you get is according to the law. God has got nothing to do with it. Okay, so when you do something, you get something which is directly proportional to what you have done, but you get it according to the law. God doesn't give it to you. Okay, so if I do something, then I will have to bear the brunt of it according to the law of karma. Now, what will God be doing there? God will be helping me. God will be giving me power, giving me happiness, giving me strength, giving me support. But the thing is, religion messed this whole up. Why? Because, or I don't know whether religion messed it up, but the way we are interpreting it right now messed it up. Because if you think that when I do something wrong, then God is annoyed on me or God punishes me, then what happens is you cut off yourself from the source of strength. Okay, so when I did something and the return comes to me, then God is giving me the strength and the love and the support, which I can take and deal with the consequence of what is coming. But if I think that God is party to the law of karma, then I cannot take his support when I am in dire circumstances because of my karma. Do you get it? For example, if I am rude to you and you are conversely rude to me, okay, so you are also rude to me. So when you are rude to me, I can connect with God, take his love, take his energy of love, and come to a place of sweetness, and then I can handle your rudeness and give sweetness instead and change the cycle. But if I think that God is annoyed upon me because I was rude to you, then I can't take sweetness from him and change this cycle. Got it? So God actually helps us transcend this law of karma or deal with what comes back to me according to the law of karma. But if I think that God is not with me because I did something wrong, then I can't take power from him and I can't deal with the consequences of my own karma. Is it clear? So now here I would like to tell you one thing. We will talk about karma probably tomorrow because karma is a big subject and I want you to be clear about what is bad karma, good karma and all of that. But today I will talk about one thing, which is God helps you settle your karma. God helps you settle your karma. So you must have come across this phase called, this is a karmic account. You know, somebody, you are in a difficult situation or you are in a difficult state of health, or you are with a person whose sanskars are very different from yours, and then you listen from some spiritual person that this is because of past karma. So then you can take the help of God to settle that past karma. How do you do that? Now suppose you are going through physical illness, all right, and there is pain in the body. So what you can do is you can unplug from the body, plug into God, take peace from God, keep your mind peaceful and let the illness pass. All right, so that illness doesn't traumatize you while it lasts. Right, so Janki Dadiji, when she used to experience acute pain in the body, she used to just lie down and be quiet for days together. And when somebody asked, Dadiji, what are you doing? Then she would say, I'm sitting with God and letting the pain pass. Okay, so this is how you settle karma. Now, suppose somebody is always telling you you are not good enough. And this is a situation where you find yourself always. So then what you can do is you can sit with God who always tells you you are the best. This person tells you 5 times you're not good enough. Baba tells you 50 times you're the best. And you can keep listening to what Baba is saying and let this thing pass. Okay, so there is a manner in which karmic accounts manifest. So what is the manner? They come, they persist for a while and they leave. There is no karmic account which stays always until unless you aggravate it. So if you are not adding to it, it has a duration. It comes, it persists for a while and then it leaves. But when it comes up, if you are with God, then you can be patient, you can be peaceful, you can be happy and allow it to pass. And if you are not with God, then you are with the karmic account, which means you are giving it more and more energy, because where attention goes, energy flows. And then you are exacerbating it or aggravating it more and more. so that the duration of the karmic account grows. All right, so this is how God helps you settle karma. Okay, so you have to unplug from the karmic account, plug into God, stay with God, engrossed and engulfed by His qualities until the karmic account passes and leaves. Okay, so this is how you operate with. I will talk about karma in detail tomorrow, and also I will talk about how to settle karmic account in more detail tomorrow. But for now, this is what I want to share. All right. So now let us take up the questions that have come. So you came to know the name of God and the form of God and the quality of God, and that God is an ocean of love and He never goes to hate or dislike or judgment. So He's the ocean of love, and rest assured, whatever you did and whatever you are doing, God is never annoyed with you. But yes, the law of karma will give you the return. So you better be good so that according to the law of karma, you don't face a lot. But then, even if something is there and you've done it in the past and that is coming up, then God is with you. You can pull strength from Him and settle this karma. All right. Okay, so there are lots of questions today, probably. My daughter growing will involve these external stimuli. Okay. How can she have a normal societal growing if we should look inward from these stimuli? So, what do you mean by a normal societal growing? That means, see, whatever has to come has to come. She will go to school, she will go to college, all the things that have to happen will happen. But when you look inwards, there will be a change in approach, which is everything will happen for you, not to you. And when you look outwards, everything will happen to you and not for you. So when you go with the approach that this is happening to me, it breaks you. And when you think this is going for me, then it makes you. So we are not changing the context of your or your daughter's operation. So that context remaining the same. If you change your approach to these situations, then you grow, not break in these situations. And anyways, everything is normal societal growing. So you see, I wear a white dress, but I meet everybody who is in colored dress. And they come with their whole baggage and their whole lifestyle and everything. So I'm also having a very normal normal life in that way, because although my practices are different, but I am also subject to all the environmental influences and everything. But the change here is how I deal with it. Okay, so what comes to me, what comes to you is the same. The only change is how we deal with it. When you are inwardly oriented, you deal with it differently. That's it. Hi, sister. My father always tries to make fun of my fiancé and tries to let him feel down, which I don't like, and I want to give it back to him. I feel very agitated when anybody says anything bad about my fiancé, because I know he's such a pure and great person. So probably it's time for a fiancé to stand up for himself rather than you standing up for him. Okay, so pure and great people should also speak up for themselves. This is what he needs to learn, and nobody learns anything unless circumstances force them to. So you don't try to fight for him, you teach him to fight for himself. Okay, so you can tell him that you be assured, if you find that you are being insulted, you can talk back and I will support you. So you can say this to him and you can teach him how to stand up for himself, because If you do something for somebody, then they don't they don't they don't get the skill of doing it for themselves. But if you teach somebody something, they acquire that skill. So this is the approach you should follow, right? And there is a belief that good people should be dumb, but no, you can talk and be good. Okay, so good people don't have to be doormats. So it is time that that idea is challenged. We always believe God is everywhere, but you told that He is not everywhere. So now you have two things that are being told. People are telling you it's everywhere, and I'm telling you He is not everywhere. So now you have to judge for yourself. Which one do you find is good, right? Because I'm giving you all the justification for why I say He's not everywhere, and it is for you to judge which one do you want to go with. When are you likely to arrange this course in English again? Not very likely, very soon. Because this course will take time, so another course will take longer. So I would suggest that if you want to recommend this to somebody, you can recommend the video sessions that are uploaded on YouTube. Okay, but mother parents bring our soul to world. We have a connection. We used to explain satsangi as teachings offered by teacher. So this is why we are reinterpreting thing in the light of truth, everything in the light of truth. So satsang doesn't mean the sang of a guru or a teacher or anybody. Satsang only means the sang of God. Okay. I didn't get how we can connect to God and how can we talk to Him. So in the meditation, what we are doing is we are silencing everything else, coming to that place of awareness that I'm a soul, I belong to God, I have all relationships with God. Now you see, how do you connect to anybody for that matter? When you want to connect to your mother, you think about your mother. Okay. And when do you think about your mother? When you think about yourself as a child. Okay. So you become a child, then you remember your mother. And when you remember your mother's face and her features and character pop up into your mind. And then you experience her. Right? Similarly, when you become a soul, you remember the Supreme Soul. Yes. And then when you remember the Supreme Soul, His form, that is a point of light, and His qualities, that He is loving you, He is very peaceful and very happy, pops up in your mind, and you start feeling it. This is how you connect with God. Okay. Then why do we worship Shivling when Shiva is a point of light? Because we did not know how to connect with something that is non-physical. So we created everything physical because we are operating in material consciousness right now. Okay. But are religions created by us or God? Of course by us. God never came and created anything. We created religions. Why we say Shiva resides at Kailash? So you can go to Kailash and find out. So we say all this, but then, I will tell you one thing. So there is this culture of going for kavad. So in Savan, people carry kavad. So these days it is not that popular, but when I was a child, this was very popular, and people used to go take kavad to different places. So once I was very adamant, and I told my father I want to go and go with those kavadis, and I will also offer my kavad there. So he said, okay, you do what you like. So then I went, and then when I came back, my father was very quiet and he didn't tell me anything, but he just kept observing. And then he said, you are the same before you went and after you came. You are just a little more tired and agitated. So I don't know what that has done to you. so, so I said, so I'm agitated because I'm tired. So he said, yes. So what I'm observing is you are more agitated and more tired after coming back. So why did you go there in the first place? So I said, what do you want? Ritual, not to become something. So that is why then he pointed out, why don't you go somewhere where you become something rather than do something only? So that is the time I started thinking about, okay, so the purpose of religion should be to make us better, not only to do something externally. And that is why when I came to Brahma Kumaris, it resonated that yes, what they are saying is change the being, not the doing. So, and if you change the being, then the doing already gets tweaked on its own. So then this resonated with me. Okay. Is God married or single? He can be married to you if you agree. So God is looking for brides. So if the soul wants to be the bride, then God is here to get married. Okay. So this is a Swayamvar basically. So God is choosing the bride, or you are choosing your groom. So whichever way you like. Didi, we had a prayer service at home yesterday for my grandmother who passed away 2 years back. There's this particular time of the year when we offer this puja. This is Shraddh time, so probably that Shraddh you're talking about. Okay. So, and the objective is to make the soul meet its ancestors, Pitrapaksh. But by now, she should have already taken another form. So, why do we do all this? So, basically, you see, yes, the soul has taken birth by now, and it's just to remember somebody fondly. And wherever the soul is, if you remember them with love and regard, your feeling reaches that soul. So that is the purpose, if there is any. So there is no problem dispensing with the whole ritual. But if at all you are becoming party to it, so there is nothing wrong about it, because anyways a soul always receives vibrations and wishes wherever they are. So if you are thinking about them with love and regard, they receive it. Okay. Why do they do they do abhishekams every day in the temples? Because basically in the temples there are deities, and deities are us. So we will talk about that. So God, our original form is the deity form, and because we forget every time, so we have to be reminded every day of who we are. So that practice can be called the Abhishek. So every day in the morning you have to remind yourself of who you are. So similarly, every day the deity is invoked and the deity is emerged before puja. So similarly, when you do Amrit Vela, it is similar to Abhishekam. Okay. Then who gives it according to the law of karma? So nobody gives it according to the law of karma. Do you ask this in case of laws of physics? So who gives it when there is an equal and opposite reaction? No, it's by law you get it. So similarly, it's by law that you get a return for your karma. I want to talk to you on a phone call. Okay. So you can talk to me over a phone call, but wait for some days, because probably your questions will be answered here itself, and I will talk to each one of you. So be a little patient. These days I'm a little tied up, but I will give time to each one of you and you can talk to me. There is no problem. I am yours and I'm fully available. There is no issue. How does one sit with God and not just sit? Okay. So when you sit with God, you don't sit with other things, people and places in your head. So you can either be with people, places and things, or you can be with God. So when you unplug from here, you plug in there. Okay. How to overcome negativity or negative thoughts? So there is no way to overcome them. You can substitute them with positive ones. Okay, so you can't empty your mind. You can only change your thoughts from negative to constructive or positive. uh okay, so God is omnipresent. God is not omnipresent. Okay, so God is someone and is somewhere, not omnipresent, but He can be available to you whenever you invoke Him, that is, whenever you unplug from here. Is chanting required in meditation? An internal chant, that is, an internal awareness is required, not some physical chanting. Okay, so when you are rhythmically reminded that I am a soul and this is my everything and everyone, that is God and He is with me, so this inner commentary you need, not any physical chant. Why have we been sent to earth in this material world? I mean, we tend to lose soul consciousness. So, what is the purpose of this? And also, what is the purpose of life? So, the purpose of life is to meet God after you are separated from God. So, this is a game. You meet God and then you separate from God and then you lose your consciousness, then you gain your consciousness. Just like everything else is a game. You eat, then you get hungry, then you eat, then you get hungry. Then why do you eat at all? You should stop eating. But you do that. So, this is the process of life. So, there is only a process of life, there is no purpose of life. Okay, and in the process, sometimes you feel full, sometimes you feel empty. So, when you feel empty, it's time to recharge. When you feel full, it's time to radiate. So, this is how life goes. It is said that your ancestors meet you when you die. Would they not have taken rebirth? Then how can they meet you? They don't meet you when you die. Okay, so it is only said that you meet them because we want to meet them. So it is said you die and then you meet them because there is no other way to pacify you. So you don't meet anybody when you die. You only take rebirth. Sorry, my network gone. Okay. So have patience. We will all talk. Okay. Chalo. So let's meditate for some time. Sit still. Pull your awareness from the external world and take it to your mind. Your mind is a small room which is presently cluttered with a lot of things from outside. Just stand on the door of that room and see it clean out. As I see my mind, every other thought is going out, and the light of peace enters my mind and fills it. Soothing white light of peace enters my mind and fills it. I leave my body at the door, become a point, and enter that room. This is such a beautiful state of my mind. I'm sitting as a point, and all around me there is this presence of the ocean of peace. I'm sitting in the lap of God, the ocean of peace. Just like when you enter an ocean, there is water everywhere. Right now, there is peace in every corner of my mind. I'm soaking in that peace. The peace is becoming a part of me. I feel so relaxed and peaceful. Just sit in this feeling for some time. Om Shanti.